Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks.
Hello and welcome to Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks. I'm Ridhima Bhatnagar. Well, India's enterprise workspace story is entering a decisive new chapter. What began as flexible offices has today evolved into fully managed campuses, spaces that are no longer optional but critical business infrastructure. As global capability centers and large enterprises scale in India, they're looking beyond square footage towards speed, resilience, and the ability to grow without friction. In this episode, we shall bring you dialogues with the founders of Smartworks, Neetish Sarda and Harsh Binani, who are together redefining capital efficiency, enhancing workforce productivity, and enabling the geographical agility of enterprises. Now, this conversation also sets the stage for the larger Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange series, spotlighting how Smartworks is emerging as a long-term infrastructure partner, shaping the way modern organizations build, scale, and sustain their India presence. So fasten your seatbelts on what promises to be a very, very riveting conversation. Start this conversation, I have a very, very special guest with me to really talk about this growing enterprise in India, which is really redefining the workspace story in India. I have the pleasure of having with me Neetish Sarda, the MD and founder at Smartworks. Neetish, firstly, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Help me understand some of the kind of choices and talks and deliberations that Smartworks had to wanting to talk about managed campuses vis-a-vis co-working spaces, and the fact that you've had this sort of a first mover advantage and one of the first as far as this entire evolving ecosystem is concerned. How does that peg you in this growing infrastructure?
So Smartworks, we started off as any other co-working space, but as you rightly said, India is currently in a very evolving situation where the requirement for office spaces is mostly coming from mid to large enterprise clients. About 90% of our demand comes from mid to large enterprise clients. We realized fairly quickly into starting off Smartworks that in order to cater to the requirement of these large enterprises, the product that Smartworks needs to create needs to be a little more Indianized. You need to create an ecosystem which is catering to the requirements of these mid to large enterprises. So instead of going down the road of doing co-working spaces, we went ahead and focused on creating campuses. While I was studying in America and I had the opportunity of visiting some of the campuses of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and I was really mesmerized with the kind of experience that their employees get in their entire campuses. Fast forward, when I came back to India, briefly was working with my father, realized that the office ecosystem in India is completely different.
Yeah.
That kind of amenities is only available in large campuses and is only available to select few enterprises who've reached a certain scale. That is where we realized that this is a massive opportunity. Why not create a product where you're getting the flexibility of co-working, but you're giving the amenities of a campus to the enterprise clients? And I think it's paid off. It's been a great journey. It's been almost 9 years now that we have started Smartworks, and today we've grown to become one of the largest flex players in the country with a focus on mid to large enterprise clients.
Fascinating, Neetish, about this evolving ecosystem, and I'll come back to that in just a bit. But I also want to throw some light, a report of yours, in fact, which talks about India's next commercial real estate wave, and that has a very fascinating data. And for the benefit of our viewers, it says that we have great projections by 2030, but the kind of requirement that the GCCs will have by 2030, about half of them, in fact, will be catered by these flex workspaces. So if that's the potential, I want to understand, one, how do you ensure that you have everything to cater to that demand, and what will it take for us to reach there?
So if you look at India, why is there a GCC boom? Before I talk about what GCCs really require, why is there a GCC boom in India? If you look at the number of workforce that large enterprises can hire and scale up in India, it is second to none. India is probably the only country which can provide a company entering here within a matter of months can scale their operations to 1,000 people. This is something that cannot be replicated anywhere else. That's why you're seeing this demand of GCCs coming in. What is different between the BPO or the outsourcing revolution that happened in India and now the GCC revolution that is happening is that GCCs aren't just outsourcing work. They are now 60% of the GCCs coming into India are now centers of excellences. These are R&D centers which are developing for the world.
Yeah.
That is where we're seeing most of these enterprise clients, most of these large companies coming up and setting up their offices in India. What we realized was when these companies are setting up their offices, the basic requirement that they have is of office spaces. Most of these GCCs don't come and set up in one location. They are opening up offices across 2 or 3 different cities. When you're opening up offices across 3 cities, you want a standardized experience for the employees who are coming in to your space. What Smartworks has been able to do very well is to go back to these enterprise clients, GCCs, and say that whether you're taking 20,000 square foot in Bombay or 100,000 square foot in Gurgaon, the experience that your employees are going to get right from the point that they enter into the building, how are they greeted, how do they park, they come in, they use the gyms, they have access to the cafeteria, they can have breakfast there, they then work, they also have access to the gyms and the other amenities in the campus, irrespective of whether it's 20,000 or 100,000 square foot of space. That is the kind of advantage that is really driving these GCCs to come and say that why do I need to have my own office? Why do I have the headache of dealing with multiple landlords, dealing with multiple design and build firms to build out my space? Here, there is a product which is giving me the flexibility, giving me a solution in which I'm getting offices made in 60 to 75 days of when I require it, and gives me a completely hassle-free solution with scalability options to grow between cities. And that's why we think that the kind of product that we are offering is allowing GCCs to adapt to this more than traditional spaces where they have to deal with a lot more. Right? And I think in the last couple of years, this revolution of GCCs increasing has also led to the industry growing significantly. If you look at flex industry in India today, it's the largest in the world. And a significant portion of that is already taken by GCCs and will continue taking up a master share.
You know what you said, there's one word which really fascinated me, which is that you have to make spaces that also keep in mind the changing demands and evolution of this space, which is what we will see, say, in the next 10 to 15 years, right? And I will come back to that in terms of how do you make an infrastructure both smart and evolving to those needs. But, you know, you have an IPO behind you, which means there is also far greater responsibility. But I also want to understand from a strategy perspective, now that you're a publicly listed company, how does that redefine or change your strategy as a long-term infrastructure player for a very, very evolving enterprise?
You know, for us, IPO had always been a comma. It was never a full stop. Okay. It is the start of the journey. You know, when we were thinking about going public, it was with the vision that there is a potential of this business to scale up to 30, 40, 50 million square foot over the next few years. If you look at India's ecosystem, we've grown to 1 billion square foot of office space since independence, right? So it's been about 60 plus years that we've grown to 1 billion square foot of space. The next billion is going to get added in the next 15 to 20 years. So the growth of India generally has significantly increased. But for Smartworks, because we realized that the potential was to grow to 40, 50 million square foot on our own, we thought going public would allow us to get that credibility. We were at a decent size, we were at a very good scale, where we thought that taking the company public gives you a sense of responsibility. Governance becomes very, very important. You're also opening up to people, so you give them that comfort that you're opening up your books and showing them how the company is growing. So I think it was a very pivotal moment, but we look at it as just a moment. I think there is a long, long journey to go, and we're continuously working towards getting to that scale which we are internally targeting.
Well, he's really hoping that this is just one of the first milestones that you cover, and there'll be many more. But getting to that very fascinating aspect that I wanted to discuss with you, which is that when you're designing a campus and you're speaking to all these GCC players, one, of course, is that it needs to look smart from a brand perspective, right? But the other is what you said, which is that how do you keep in mind that this is also a very evolving workspace, right? Because my demands and my partners' demands could also keep changing with time. So how are you getting that balance right?
So what we've done is we've studied. Now we have over 750 large enterprises sitting with us. With these companies, we understand what are the requirements that their employees require on a day-to-day basis. On an average in India, an employee spends about 9.5 to 10 hours at work. You know, if you're spending that kind of work, you are taking multiple breaks in the day. You're going down to buy something. You're consuming coffee. You're consuming, other consumables on a day-to-day basis. You're having lunch, dinners, breakfast, also within the space. So when we created this ecosystem, we mapped out the entire 10 hours for a customer, for an employee.
Okay.
Right from the point that they enter into the building. How are they being greeted? What do they do in the first hour? What do they do in the lunch hour? What do they do when they're moving out? And we continuously monitor each and every part of our office to see where the maximum movement is, right? Like, for example, we created a cafeteria. We realized in a cafeteria is usually used for 3 to 4 hours in a day.
Yeah.
Right? So why do you want a space which is only used for 4 hours in a day? Before and after that 4-hour critical, between 12 to 4.
How can that be used?
Yeah. So we have created sports in these locations. So, we remove the tables, we get in all the table tennis and some of the other sports to come in. We utilize this space for town halls. We utilize this space for having like an all hands meeting as well. So we created a more integrated solution where we use a lot of data to track what is the usage of your building. So just continuously evolving the model, thinking from a customer's point of view, and more importantly, thinking from the employee's point of view, the guy who's actually going to come and spend that 10 hours a day. What are some of the things that we can do to make it, a little better experience for them, and to make sure that the customer is also happy because their employees are happy.
It is very fascinating, because this is very different to what we've known from the traditional setups to a very evolving, fluid workspace. Thank you. So this conversation has been fascinating on multiple levels, and we have a hot cup of coffee also now waiting for us. So Neetish, what I exactly wanted to now understand, because you deal with GCC CEOs and the leadership team on a day-to-day basis, what is that one advice that you're in fact now giving them from a real estate perspective that could be, a lot of contradictory opinions that have been given to them in the past?
For us, what really lies in the center of the offering that we give to our GCCs and all our customers is not just experience. It's also flexibility, experience, but at a cost which is 15 to 20% more economical than if they were to do it on their own.
Yeah.
What we have done very well is we've capped and realized, because we have these over 750 large enterprises sitting with us, we have realized what their employees really need on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
We've made all of those amenities in the space. We have given them the flexibility of expanding their business as and when it requires. So for example, if a customer takes 400 seats with us in Bombay and 400 seats in Bangalore, some reason Bangalore doesn't do that well, wants to reduce 100 seats there and increase 100 seats in Bombay, we will let them do that without worrying about lock-ins.
Oh, lovely.
So that kind of flexibility really allows them to only pay for when they really require that seat. But this experience, this flexibility, all comes at a cost which is 15 to 20% more lower, cheaper than if they were to do it on their own. We don't charge them a premium. We're not charging them 25, 30,000 rupees a seat to be in this ecosystem. We're saying we're giving you all of this, but at a cost which is significantly lower than if you were to do it on your own. So it becomes a very easy decision for any CEO to really look at SmartWorks as a full-time solution and a long-term solution for that.
Fascinating. But Neetish, I'll request you to hold on to your thought. I do want to get back to a lot of aspects, but I believe that we also have another very special guest at this point joining us. Harsh Binani, the co-founder at Smartworks, is also now joining us. So Harsh, welcome into the conversation. We've already had a very riveting conversation with Neetish, and I do want to continue that with you as well. And I hope we'll see you on the other side now, Neetish.
Absolutely. I'm going to leave you with more able hands.
Okay. Harsh, firstly, thank you for taking our time once again and to join us. We are talking to you at a very, very exciting time. A lot is happening in your space. Why don't we begin from there? Why don't you tell us how the India story is panning out?
Thank you firstly, and it's a pleasure to host you at Smartwork campus here in Gurgaon.
Pleasure is all ours.
And it's a very interesting inflection point for the Indian office evolution as we speak. In the last 20 years, practically from less than 200 million square foot, we've seen a fivefold increase now to over 1 billion square foot in space, which makes India the 4th largest market for office. But as they say, it's just the tip of the iceberg, because the next 1 billion build out, which is essentially once in a generation opportunity, is going to happen only in the next 10 to 15 years. And within that context, of course, it's been a very rewarding journey for us, because the managed workspace category, which we pioneered and created when we started off, has now become the largest in the world, which just gives you a sense of the velocity of growth and adoption this entire space has seen. And particularly what used to be a very deliberate strategy for large enterprises to move into traditional campuses earlier has now started to move a lot towards manage, which is what excites us in terms of what's lying ahead for the next decade for us.
So, Harsh, as we said, very exciting, a lot of hope for the India story, a lot of optimism. But now I want to get more specific in terms of your interaction, your advice that is being sent out to the GCC leadership, you know, how all of that is changing their real estate decisions as well, right? And I was asking Neetish this as well. When we're seeing the acceptance for these managed campuses, flex spaces, right? I want to understand how is factors like speed, scale, risk, all of this coming in as part of the real estate decisions now?
Of course, it's very important first to take a step back. Having spent more than 6-7 years in US, I can safely say the perception has not only changed, but at the same time, the center of gravity now has moved firmly towards India, which earlier used to be known more for being the back office of the world, is now increasingly becoming the innovation engine that powers the world in a very meaningful way. And when we talk about the opportunity, it's a tectonic shift where you're going to look at more than 100,000 seats of GCCs getting added every year. GCCs have obviously been recognized globally. Why India is becoming extremely important in this context is that these are no longer offices which used to take care of the needs of US or Europe when they were sleeping. But they are the ones now who are driving a lot of innovation, R&D, which in some ways is to say that when the world wakes up, India is actually giving them the brief in terms of where a lot of innovation can happen. And within this context, GCCs appreciate the fact that what used to take several years now is now going to happen in a matter of few weeks, which is changing the paradigm where real estate earlier used to be known more as a static item, a liability in the balance sheet. Now it's becoming more of a dynamic item, which enables speed to market. So for any large global enterprise who's looking to enable a campus here, it's a matter of few weeks where they don't have to worry about ownership. They can practically talk about not customization, but standardizing at scale and really building out their needs. And that's what's making this entire evolution very exciting, where not only is India getting advantage around the talent that is available readily, but also the ecosystem and the rental arbitrage, which truly makes it an entire ecosystem, which is very compelling, which you cannot ignore.
Interesting. Harsh, I want to continue our conversation as we also get you now a cup of coffee. But I want to understand specifically now with GCCs, you know, because you deal with them almost on a day-to-day basis, how is the journey and the significance of accompanying these GCCs on their growth journey?
The conversation is evolving. And it's firmly moving away from being a lease manager, which is how the conversation initially picked up as a real estate partner, to how can you be now the ecosystem partner, where you're not only enabling our space, but you're taking care of all that we need in a one-stop manner, right from setting up your space to making sure that your legal and compliance is completely in conformity with the regulations. and at the same time making sure that the talent becomes available very easily. When the conversation becomes more strategic, then you are essentially talking about partnership, where not only are you enabling them move in a few weeks, 60 to 90 days, but you're also having that conversation that here is where we can be your pan-India infrastructure partners. You focus on your business, let us focus on our business and do this all together and really seize the GCC moment in India.
Yeah, I want to talk to you specifically about Smart Vantage now. This is purpose-driven, purpose-built, purpose-driven. Help me understand, how is this helping GCCs with their growth story and their decision-making as well?
They don't have to converse and speak to 10 different service providers to enable their GCC in India. Here is a one single unified platform which enables their need, whether it's for legal, compliance or talent, all under the same umbrella. Of course, we are partnered with several great firms who are doing this in partnership with us. But the conversation then changes for the large enterprises, where they simply have to put together their wish list. And here is where, through our service partners and ourselves, available across India, to just enable them and scale up.
Yeah. I was talking to Neetish also, Harsh, about this, that when we're talking about these flex workspaces, of course, there is a talk about using the physical workspace better, maybe increasing productivity, or having a more fluid workspace. That's one aspect of it. But what Neetish was also telling me was very interesting, that you have a lot of repeat clients, right, who are continuing to grow with you, continuing to stay with you, which also gets me to the point that this must be very, very cost efficient, right? So help me understand, how are these very evolving dynamic workspaces helping in terms of cost efficiency for these partners as well?
Of course, the business model makes sense for both of us.
Yeah.
Both of us are chasing predictability and standardization.
And it has to.
And it has to, of course. With these larger enterprises, when the conversation becomes more strategic at a pan-India infra level, you are elevating the dialogue that how can I enable your business to grow and focus. Where we are starting to see a lot of opportunities and value addition is the fact that through their movement into managed campuses, they're obviously able to move in very quickly.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's cost efficient. It's completely customized to their needs. And now that that relationship has got initiated, we've served over 800 clients now. The level of predictability that we in our technology stack have built now, that if it's a BFSI major, we exactly know the type of office that you would need, which will enable your employees to be happy and productive in that environment.
Yeah.
And if we were to now simply say, if you were to use cloud infrastructure, it's very scalable, it's standardized. That's the same sort of dialogue that you're trying to now usher in. That physical infrastructure is how the entry point started, but your user experience is more akin to a digital infrastructure, which is very scalable and predictable without you having the entire friction of dealing with several partners, which of course is a big drag on your administrative time.
And works well, as you said, for both partners, right? You have to get the maximum in terms of, because you're not building just for today, you're building for the future as well, right? And that's something that I want to understand from you. If managed campuses are the big pulse talking point of 2026 and the growth story, how do you see this evolving in terms of the needs of the GCCs going forward?
We've had the version 1.0 of managed workspaces, which has essentially made us in category the largest in the world.
Yeah.
The next evolution of this is only going to enhance the market leadership that the top players are going to seize, because of course the space is now also starting to see a lot of credibility, a lot of large enterprises come in, and public markets, etc., are also welcoming this new multi-decade opportunity, which has a very high visibility for growth. So as we see at the next evolution, GCC is going to drive a major part of our growth.
Yeah.
But alongside, the more important structural shift that this managed workspace category has brought is now a lot of conglomerates, a lot of older enterprises which were more towards traditional workspaces have now started to strategically look at this category to provide them the much needed flexibility and agility. So not only will GCC be one engine which will power the growth in the next, but alongside you will start to see a lot of structural behavioral shift where traditional office spaces will increasingly start getting managed.
Yeah, very interesting. What you said, the GCCs will be driving this growth, and you will have put out a report which says that about half of what is projected by 2030, in fact, will be taken by GCC. So that's the kind of potential that we're seeing. But At a time when we're talking, Harsh, this entire space is very fragmented, right? So going forward, if you do want to tap into the full potential, what will differentiate the ones that are successful vis-a-vis that are still trying to get a grasp of it?
We already are playing in a sector where you will start to see the large continuing to get larger, and you will firmly see consolidation on the cards as well. What we believe at SmartWorks differentiates us and makes it a very unique value proposition is the fact that we are a platform which takes on leads really large campuses. In fact, 4 of the 5 largest campuses in the world are now with SmartWorks. And when you're taking large campuses at that scale and ramping up the occupancy very quickly with larger enterprises, then you are ushering in a massive network effect, which on one end enables you to continue to get these enterprises to work with you across different cities.
True.
But at the same time, unit economics and cash flow wise, it's extremely prudent because the business gravitates not only towards more value creation on the revenue growth and EBITDA growth, but at the same time, from an investor lens, it creates a lot of cash flows and essentially makes you self-sustaining, where no further capital is essentially required for you to grow, which is where we believe that SmartWorks is at that unique inflection point, and we are just now waiting to take off again for the next evolution of our growth.
Sounds absolutely exciting. And Harsh, I will also request you to now hold on to your thoughts, because we want to now get Neetish back in the conversation to also now not just talk about what's happening now, but looking ahead as far as this very evolving workspace is concerned.
Certainly.
While we continue this conversation with 2 very special gentlemen, Neetish Sarda, the MD and founder at SmartWorks, and Harsh Binani, the co-founder at SmartWorks. Gentlemen, there is so much that we've already covered, but as I was telling both of you earlier, that we want to also now talk about what does the next decade really look like, right? So Neetish, I'd like to begin with you, and then Harsh, feel free to please chip in. When we look at the next decade, when we look in the future, what is that one really interesting key feature that will really define how all these decisions are really taken?
I think, we're moving in an environment where things are moving away from just providing space to experience. I think the new age workforce that is coming, us millennials and then the Gen Z, we are exposed to so much through social media that we require a lot more from our workspaces. I think evolution of workspaces, what you'll see over the next decade, is going to be significantly more. It's not just going to be workstation and desks anymore. I think it's going to be more engaging. Technology is going to play a very, very important role. How seamless is technology and how smart is your building in order to run the entire office on a day-to-day basis. And I think the most important thing for India is going to be scalability. How quickly can you give the option to the large enterprise clients to scale their business across the country? I think these are the 3 major focus areas that we will at least focus on.
Harsh, the same question to you, that one feature that will define business infrastructure that possibly doesn't exist at scale today.
Perhaps just to add to Neetish's point, today there is a distinction between physical workspaces and digital networks. The answer is going to somewhere lie in the confluence of both, where it's no longer going to be about just the physical space that you occupy, but similar to how you see digital networks, right? They are scalable, standardized, multi-city. Wherever you go, you find the same experience. So perhaps that integrated experience network, standardized pan-India, is where you will likely see the confluence of both physical and digital network to be.
Lovely. Neetish, I want to come back to you. We've of course spoken about a large acceptance by GCCs and others for managed campuses, but I'm sure that evolution hasn't been all hunky-dory. I'm sure there have been some misconceptions as well. Do you want to take us through some of those?
No, absolutely. I think it's taken us a lot of time to create a product which most of the large GCCs are now opening up to. I think it wasn't an easy journey. It started off by first convincing someone to move their office infrastructure, something that they're using on a daily basis, into a setup like ours. There was a little bit of, initially we required a lot of selling that we needed to do. I think what has really changed is the fact that now we service a little over 760 large enterprises. Now the enterprises selves are offering. The fact that a lot of these guys are growing with SmartWorks across different locations, the fact that they understand the value that SmartWorks is giving, getting the next deal is 761st deal has become much easier. But I think it is still a journey where you have to continuously evolve. I don't think we are in a situation where you can just scale up this product. while the scale up will happen, but you need to continuously evolve and make sure that you're catering to whatever new requirement that comes up for most of these companies.
Harsh, what about you? What is that one conversation that you think will become more mainstream as part of these strategic partnerships?
Firstly, the dialogue with Forbes will set the context and the narrative about defining what does GCC mean.
Yeah.
It's an often confused term, right from the evolution where back offices and call centers were how you had a lot of absorption happen. Today, global capability centers are a strategic function which drives a lot of functions of large MNCs overseas. Yeah. And therefore, it's imperative that we set the narrative first of what does it mean? Why is it important? India had a similar moment in 2000s when SEZ became one of the foundation for us becoming an export powerhouse.
Correct.
We hope now, with India increasingly becoming the office to the world, this new digital export that we are facilitating, the dialogue does not spread to a few Fortune 500 companies. It spreads to all the future companies as well as all the large companies in Europe, Asia, that India is here ready to welcome you with open arms. And as they say, this is just the beginning. There's an entire decade now ahead of us.
Very fascinatingly put, and the parallel we've seen decades ago from the call center industry to the BPM industry, something similar that we're seeing with the potential of GCCs and flex spaces as well. But gentlemen, this has been such a pleasure. So thank you so much. Thank you, Neetish. Thank you, Harsh. As you said, this is just the beginning. Many more milestones for us to cover in this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, as India continues to cement its position as a global hub for enterprise growth and of course GCC expansion, the role of managed campuses is only becoming far more strategic than transactional. What we've heard today makes one thing very, very clear. Workspaces are no longer just about real estate, but also about enabling scale, resilience, and also long-term value. So we really hope there were a lot of learnings for each of you who watched this conversation as well. That's all from me on this edition of Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks. Until next time, goodbye and many thanks for watching.
Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks.